Hello and welcome. Check out these two 1986 Bridgestone MB-3s. Now, you've heard of N+1, where N equals the number of bikes you own now, and N+1 is the number of bikes you should own. Well, what about N+2? I kid though, these are not my bikes. These belong to a friend of mine. She asked me if I could take a look at them and get them going again because they've been sitting for 10 years. I said sure, because the only thing that's more fun for me than tinkering on my own bikes is tinkering on somebody else's bikes. So let's have a closer look at these, shall we? The first thing that I noticed about this blue step-through model is the gorgeous, and I do mean gorgeous, metallic blue paint job. It is just so vibrant and sparkly, and unfortunately, video does not do it justice. The frame consists of 4130 chromoly straight gauge tubing. Now, straight gauge is simply consistent wall thickness throughout the tube. That's as opposed to double butted tubing, which has varying wall thicknesses in order to save weight. The fork is also steel. I guess it's not a surprise given the era. Branding on this MB-3 is relatively understated. They used contrasting yellow decals for the names and the logos, and for the chainstay guard, there's a raised hard plastic Bridgestone. So that's kind of a neat little touch, rather than something that's just, screen printed on it or whatever. And speaking of decals and whatnot, here's the decal for the frame tubing. As I said earlier, it's 4130 chromoly, but you look down a little bit there where the seat tube joins the down tube, made in Japan. So that's kind of indicative of the era in which this bike was built, isn't it? The handlebar is an alloy SR unit. As you can see, it's got a mild rise and a mild sweep, and it's actually a pretty comfortable riding position for a more or less flat bar. The hand grips are original because both of them have the same thing. They're very comfortable, they're ergonomic. Not what I would have expected from the mid-80s, to be honest. The brakes, left and right, are Shimano AT55s. These are derailleurs brake levers. And the shifting mechanisms are Suntour friction shifters, left and right. And I kind of like friction shifters on my old bikes. It's a bit of a skill to get them just right. You have to be able to feel and listen and be in tune with your bike. The quill stem is a Sakai unit. It's alloy, and it has two rather unusual features in my experience. The first being that it has a top clamp rather than a front clamp, which kind of puts me in mind of some of the BMX bikes. And secondly, the brake cable runs straight through the clamping surface and down to the brakes. The SR branded alloy seat post is pretty straightforward. It's got a quick release and it has some decorative fluting on it. The saddle clamp is what I think of as the old style clamshell clamps. It may not be state of the art by today's standards, but it works just fine. And speaking of saddles, check this out. A genuine Selle Itailia anatomic saddle. Now the brakes, front and rear, are Shimano AT50s. As you can see, these are a set of fairly robust looking cantilever brakes. According to the spec sheet, the AT50s are X-Age, which I thought was kind of interesting given that the levers are derailleurs. The drivetrain is a 3x5 system. The crankset is a Sakai SR setup with 165mm long cranks. The chain rings are 48, 38, 32, which seems like an unusual combination, but I counted them twice. The front derailleur is a Suntour AR. Out back, we've got a 5-speed freewheel. It has a 14 to 28 tooth range. And again, the derailleur is a Suntour unit. The hubs on the front and the rear are SA Sansin. I've never heard of them, but I looked them up and apparently they were pretty well regarded back in the day. The wheels, front and rear, are Araya alloy units. They are 26 inch by 1.5 inch. As I mentioned earlier, they've got the SA Sansin hubs, and they spin really well. And given the age, I am somewhat surprised, but the wheels are still true. I'm not going to have to tinker with that whatsoever. The tires are 26 inch by 1.5 inch SCCR tan walls, and they are in remarkably good condition. Honestly, I was expecting to find a bunch of dry rot, but that's not the case. Again, I'm surprised. All in all, this MB-3 is in remarkably good shape for its age. I am impressed. And I will admit, I like the looks of it. It's a pretty bike. And I'm a sucker for a pretty bike. What can I say? The gray step-over model is very nearly identical to the blue step-through model. The big difference is that the crankset has 170mm cranks versus 165mm cranks for the step-through. And the tires. The tires are Carlisle Aggressor GTs. They're 26 by 2.1, significantly wider than the 1.5 inch wide tires on the step-through. And looking at this bike, you really can see the basic geometry that lasted well into the 1990s for rigid mountain bikes. Now, as to a step-through mountain bike, well, I would just say that back in the mid-1980s, the industry and the sport of mountain biking was still trying to find their place in the world. This bike is in exactly as good a shape as the step-through model, and I am not going to have to do a lot to bring it back. Again, I'm going to replace tubes, cables, and brake pads. As I said earlier, I want my friend to have a safe bike, but basically what this bike needs more than anything else is a good cleanup. I think that is well within my capabilities. So, the next time you see my friend's 1986 Bridgestone MB-3s, they're going to look the next best thing to brand new. If you enjoyed this video, I have a link below left to a playlist for vintage steel bikes, and I've got a link below right to another video that I think you'll enjoy. And as always, thanks a lot for watching. Seriously, I do appreciate that each and every time. Goodbye, and have a great day.